Hello and welcome. So, this series has been put together with students who are studying in the field of project management. It might be an MSc, it might be a degree program. The idea is that they would have been in their lectures and maybe for the first time started to hear various concepts around project management. And so these videos have been put together with simplicity in mind. So hopefully as they listen to the lectures and they hear various methodologies and frameworks, they're able to come into this series and find an episode that addresses that particular concept or framework or methodology or approach that they've heard, and with that simplicity be able to really make sense of what they have to fundamentally learn about that concept, framework or methodology. So that is the idea behind this particular series. So if you've just taken your first lecture in project management, perhaps you're a bit puzzled about some of the jargon, have a listen to this video. And if there's anything you don't understand or you believe would be additional to this particular episode, leave it in the comment section, bring it to our attention so that we can address that as well. Do not forget to like, comment and share with your course mates, and let's get this conversation going. So let's look at what project management is about. So project management is when we apply processes, methods, skills, knowledge and experience in such a way that it will help us deliver change. The change we are trying to deliver should address the strategic objectives our organizations are trying to achieve. These objectives need to meet specific criteria that we have agreed beforehand. All of these needs need to be done in line with an agreed budget and an agreed timeline. So, in other words, projects are vehicles of change. We use projects to bring something that didn't exist into existence. Most, if not all of us, will at a time in our life have run a project of sorts, whether it's organizing a little get together or maybe even building a house. Some of us will be great at it, some of us not so great. If you're the kind of person who is methodical, meticulous, not afraid of documentation or administration, you're great, and I mean great, at looking after people, managing people, encouraging people, then you're going to do well in the project management space. For those of us who work and study project management, the discipline, we are most likely going to find ourselves managing change that is difficult, complex, expensive, and risky. Our ability to apply the various techniques that we learn in project management hopefully helps us to minimize the risks and helps us to deliver successful outcomes, outputs, or deliverables. So that's project management in a nutshell. Okay, so let's look at the evolution of project management. I've put this in there because if you're learning project management today, it's very likely that you're going to be very focused on agile ways of working in project management, and there may not be enough time for you to appreciate, should I say, where we're coming from in terms of project management. There's a possibility that you might be lectured by someone who's very much a agile project management advocate, and just in case that happens, let me just give you sort of like a whistle stop tour of how we've got to where we've got to in project management today. So first up, Pyramids of Giza. Now, one of the reasons why the Pyramids of Giza project is highlighted as one of the biggest and the best in terms of the project management history is because it's still standing today. When you think about the objective of that project, the objective was to build something monumental to the kings of that day, and hey presto, it's still standing today, so you don't get much more monumental than that. Okay, and another reason why it would be featured in the whole milestone, project management milestone, if you like, is that the sheer complexity and the cost and the the hugeness of it all, for them to be able to accomplish that way back when technology was not even, I mean, what could have been regarded as technology back then? We would just laugh at it today. So when you think about those factors, you've really got to give it to them that it's worth a mention in the project management history. Then we've got the walls of China. It was thought to have been said that at some point, if you go to space, you'd be able to see the walls of China from space if you're in a space station. Now, I've read something also recently that said actually it's just a rumor. So I don't know who started the rumor or who finished it. But the point is this is another reference to project management at its finest. And there's two things that make it quite mentionable in the whole project management tour. Is that number one, it was built in such a way that they planned a little and they built a little. And so there you begin to see the emergence of what we called the WBS, work breakdown structure. You begin to see how iterative planning, that is very much a fundamental concept in agile ways of working today, you can see where that came from. So at some point in the whole project management journey, it used to be that a lot of people would plan a project, they'll plan every aspect of it first and then start to develop it. But at some point, especially during the agile ways of working campaign, should I say, it became apparent that you don't need to do that. You don't need to spend all your time and effort and money planning everything out. You can actually plan a little, build a little. So we can appreciate where that way of thinking has come from. It's come from way back when the walls of China were being built. Then we have the Gantt chart. The Gantt chart was designed and popularized by Henry Gantt, who was an American mechanical engineer. And what you begin to see here is you begin to see how projects are broken up into chunks against the timeline. And another thing that you begin to see is the emergence of the dependency management or the predecessor management approach. And when you think about Gantt charts and how they are used in all the various tools that we use today, this is where that idea was born. Now, there are other articles that suggest that Henry Gantt was not the first pioneer of this way of working, but because his name is what is used in the project management field, let's not waste time trying to debate that. The point is that his work brought Gantt charting into the project management sphere of doing things. His name is on the label, and as a result of him, we now have Gantt charts in our tools. We have dependency management, and we have the projects being broken up into chunks and lined up against a timeline. So that's Gantt charting for you there. Then we have critical path. The critical path method, also known as CPM, was developed in the late 1950s by Morgan R. Walker and James E. Kelly. So this is another planning and scheduling technique. Very simply put, the critical path method involves analyzing and identifying in your project the tasks that are critical when it comes to determining the timeline of your project. Okay, this methodology is also linked with the PERT methodology, and PERT stands for Program Evaluation Review Technique, and this is something that is very closely associated with the CPM method. And what the PERT method does is that it analyzes the tasks involved in completing a given project, especially the time needed to complete each task, so that you're able to identify the minimum time needed to complete the total project. So while you have with the CPM, what you're trying to do there is you're trying to identify all the projects that are on the critical path. And if those projects are on the critical path, they're the ones who are determined in the timeline. Whereas with the PERT technique, what you're trying to work out is the minimum time you need to be able to complete the entire project. Then you have the emergence of the WBS. We've already mentioned that we could see beginnings of that from the Great Wall of China project. And WBS, what that's simply doing is we are breaking down our work. We're breaking it down into manageable chunks so that we can begin to see how we can begin to deliver in parts. So generally, if you were to look at the Wall of China, for instance, and if at that time the project managers decided to build the entire wall all in one go, which means that before they start building it all, they're going to plan it all out, they'd be there forever. They wouldn't achieve as much as they could have achieved if they just started to plan a little, build a little, plan a little, build a little. And when you see that approach comes from the WBS way of thinking, breaking down your projects into manageable chunks. Now, we come to the 60s now. This is when we begin to see the PMBOK emerge. Now, the PMBOK stands for the Project Management Body of Knowledge. This is managed by the PMI. The PMI are the leading names when it comes to project management globally. They are the professional body that we all sort of like line up against, and they are responsible for the compilation, the scrutinization of all things project management, whether it's a technique, whether it's a approach, whether it's a methodology, a template, whatever it is you want to call it. You know, the PMI group are the ones that scrutinize everything we do in that space, and they bring it together for us in a guide. And when you think about where all the way back from the pyramids of Giza to the 60s, they've taken all those techniques, all those methodologies, all those best practices, all those approaches, they've taken everything together and pulled them together and put it in the PM body of knowledge. And they continue to do that. I believe we're on the 7th edition right now. So they continue to do that and continue to review, and they've brought it all the way into agile ways of working today. Then you see the waterfall methodology that came around in the 1970s, established by Winston W. Royce, and essentially it's talking about phases of management. So around about this time, it became obvious now that what we need to do is we need to have phases. And typically in a waterfall methodology, what we're saying is that in order for you to move to your next phase, the deliverables from the previous phase need to be completed first. Then you'll be able to go on to your next phase. So when you look at this picture, for instance, you have the analysis phase, and you go into your design, then your implementation, then your testing, and then your maintenance. And essentially what we're saying is that in order for you to be able to develop anything or implement anything, you first of all have to analyze it, then you have to design it. Okay, so if you don't get your analysis done, then you're not doing any design, and everything is kind of like bottleneck. And so when you think about agile ways of working, what the agile ways of working is saying that actually what you're going to do is in your analysis phase, you're going to analyze a little, and then you're going to go on and design what you've analyzed. Don't wait until you've done the complete analysis of A to Z before you go into your design. Whatever it is that you've discovered, and it's a feature, and it is a viable feature, let's go ahead and work with that. So that's the waterfall methodology. Then we've got Prince2. Prince2 is something that was developed by the UK government for their information system projects. They had a whole number of projects in the public sector then, and what they were looking for was standardization. They wanted all of their project managers to be able to follow a particular standard. Okay, so not that you're following the PERT methodology and somebody else is following the CPM. No, they wanted everybody to follow the same methodology, and that's where the Prince2 way of working came about. And then we have finally the Agile project management way of working, and that's sort of like the new kid on the block, if you like. And the thing we've come to understand about the Agile ways of working is that it's not the answer to all. Now, but I think about 4 years ago, 5 years ago, the mindset was that it's the answer to all our problems. We've come to find out that that's not actually the case. The Agile ways of working is a fantastic way, or a fantastic framework, a fantastic methodology when you're working with features, when you're working with a solution, when you're working with an innovative product. Fantastic way of working. But what we were thinking at the time was that actually, now that we have this Agile way of working, we're going to throw all these other things that we used to do, we're going to throw them all out the window. But I think that, that mindset has now changed, and that we're thinking, no, actually, we've got to take a little from here and take a little from there, and we've got to make everything work together for us. So that's the new way of working. So that's a whistle-stop tour through the ages of project management. Now, this is not every single technique that is out there. This is just a selection of techniques and how they connect to one another. Like I said, I have a very detailed video of each one of these areas and why they're techniques and how they're connected. I've got another video. You can go and have a listen to that if that's something that you're really into. No doubt a number of definitions would have already been shared with you when it comes to what is a project. So all I'm going to reiterate here is that when it comes to a project, something is a project if it's temporary. It has a beginning, it has an end. Something is a project if it is a unique endeavor. Remember, I said that we're looking at this from an organizational context. And so if an organization produces drinks, and then you're in a project that is also producing drinks, it's very likely that you're not running a project. And so you've got to ask yourself that question: is this project, how is this unique to what we do ordinarily? A project needs to deliver something very specific. You can apply your SMART acronym to it. So SMART, S-M-A-R-T, it's specific, it's measurable, it's achievable, it's realistic, and it's time bound. A project should be able to deliver something, whether it's intangible or tangible. It needs to be quite specific. It could be a product, it could be a service, or it could be a result. A project should deliver a set of defined objectives. If your product, your service, or your result does not have any objectives that will be fulfilled for the organization, you got to call yourself to attention. A project should be delivered in a fixed time frame. If you walk into a project and 2 years on, you're still delivering this project and it doesn't seem to be an end in sight, you've got to call yourself to attention. Are we really delivering a project? Allocated resources. Very often an organization will run a whole lot of projects and they're using the same resources that they use for their operations, for their business as usual. So if you have an operations manager and you also have that operations manager trying to deliver a very complex business critical project, you're going to have challenges at some point. Now, I say all of this because, number one, I believe you would have been given a whole load of definitions of what a project is. Number two, I say this because as you prepare, you're most likely taking this degree or this MSc in order for you to be prepared for the world of work. The amount of times I have walked into the world of work onto an assignment and I can see there's an issue, I can see there's a problem, and the amount of times that I've traced them back to these things not being observed, I can't count. They seem very obvious, but when you're in the world of work, due to so many reasons, we encounter problems because we are not observing these particular concepts. So have this at the back of your mind as you walk into the world of work. When you are looking at a project and it seems that it's not unique, it doesn't seem to have a timeline, the objectives, yes, we are producing this result, but it's not clear what the objectives are, just know that there's something quite wrong. Okay, so that's the reason why I'm pointing out the obvious of what is a project. Okay, now let's look at what project management is. Project management is a discipline. It started out in the manufacturing and construction industries, and over the years has crossed over into pretty much every industry. Every industry these days has, over the years, developed its own approaches, techniques, set of documentation, and best tools to use when it comes to developing and delivering projects in their own environment. So project management is a discipline that helps project stakeholders realize their goals by giving them a systematic approach to initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, controlling, and closing projects. When it comes to delivering change, we have some activities. We have a whole lot of activities going on when we initiate our projects. We have a whole load of activities when it comes to planning our projects, executing them, monitoring them, controlling them, and closing them. Depending on the industry, depending on the project, there are various activities. They're similar to one another if you look across board, but they can be quite specific depending on the project, depending on the industry, even depending on the organization. So when it comes to delivering change, we look at these 6 areas and we look at those activities, and all of those activities come from combining methodologies, principles, and tools to ensure successful project outcomes. So when you think back to the evolution of project management, you see all those techniques around planning, around scheduling, and we're going to get into some detail around the PMBOK and the waterfall methodology and all of those elements. All of those elements, they come together and we learn them so that we can have successful project outcomes. So what does change look like? Change comes in the form of a different set of outputs, a different set of outcomes. Now, if you're working with something tangible, you are most likely to be calling them outputs or deliverables. If you're working with something intangible, it's very likely that they could be referred to as outcomes, results. Sometimes they can be called deliverables, and sometimes the word deliverables, outputs, outcomes, they're all used interchangeably. Okay, I'm putting these words out there so that you start to become quite familiar with them. And so when change comes about, whether it's an output, it's an outcome, it's a deliverable, there should be an associated and identifiable value or benefit. It's very possible that you walk into a situation and due to the various politicking that is happening in the organization, it's not clear what the value or the benefit is for that project. Now, if you are the project lead, you have a bit of a challenge on your hands. If you are a member of the project team, at least you know that, okay, it's quite clear that the value or the benefit for this project is not identified. And when the people or the powers that be are ready to identify that value and that benefit, at least, you know, you can then put your hand up and say, right, let's do it. But more often than not, the reason why many projects fail is because we've not really sat down to quantify the value or the benefit for a particular project. And then what does change look like? In order for you to justify adding project management, which is an administrative layer, it's an added cost. To get that expertise in, to get those materials in, to get those applications in, to get all of that added, it's an added cost. That's why it's important to be able to identify the value and the benefit. In order for you to justify project management activity, you've got to look at the initiative. How risky is it? Is it so risky that if we do not implement it, we've got reputational damage to look at? The organization is going to lose its foothold in the market. Is it that complex that we really need to add this extra layer of project management activity? Is it that expensive to us? Not only in money, but in reputation, in ability to have a stronghold in the market. What is it going to cost us if we do not do that? And so when you're looking at change, these are the various things that you continue to have to think through as part of the project team to be able to justify doing what you guys are doing. Right, so I've mentioned a few times that when it comes to change, project management is the vehicle for change, or projects are the vehicle for change. So we want to change something and it's quite complex, it's quite risky, it's quite costly, then we turn to project management. We turn to the various techniques, the methodologies, the frameworks, the templates, all of that beautiful stuff. We use them to bring about complex, risky, costly change. So in the organizational context, when you're thinking about those changes, you're looking at project management, program management, portfolio management, and product management. So you're sitting down, you're thinking, right, this is a change that I need to bring, a new product, a new service, a new outcome, a new output, a new deliverable. What out of these four approaches, what is the best way to categorize this change? So if the change you're bringing about is maybe 2 or 3 outputs or outcomes, then perhaps project management is the best way to go. Now, if you are looking at something a bit bigger than that, in the sense that you want to change maybe 2, 3, 4 areas within the business, then you're possibly looking at a program of work. And this is why the scoping, the initiation stage is very important. And this is why it is important that you have different types of stakeholders come together to conclude the scoping or the initiation of any type of change that you want to bring, because then you'll be able to get different perspectives. It's possible that breaking this piece of work into outputs and outcomes is not going to cut it. It's very likely that you might want to break these into different projects, different work streams, to be able to bring about that change in the most effective way. And so this is when you start to look at program management. And so some hints as to whether something is a program or a project is that, number one, if it's quite visionary, in the sense that the change you want to bring about is not just affecting 1 or 2 things within the organization, it's actually impacting an entire division or entire function, then it's very possible that you're looking at a program. If what you're trying to do, you're changing the way that business runs, very likely you're looking at a program. If you want to bring in technology, and that technology is going to impact across the organization, very likely you're looking at program management, because you're going to need a number of work streams, you're going to need a number of projects. You're going to have to think about change from the human perspective. You're going to have to think about not only the system you're trying to bring, and not only the process you're trying to change, and not only the new roles and responsibilities you're trying to change, you are going to be looking at how this is going to impact people. Now, what does it look like when you have to be thinking about portfolio management? You're looking at portfolio management when you are trying to bring about something quite strategic to the organization. And that strategy may be based on location, it may be based on capability, it may be based on customer type, it may be based on market. So let's say, for instance, the organization wants to include a number of markets within its way of working. Before, it was an organization that focused primarily on the UK, but now it wants to come to Africa. So now there are quite a number of countries in Africa. So what part of Africa? The south, the north, the west, where? And so by the time that organization decides that actually we're going to focus on the west of Africa, I think, off the top of my head, we have at least maybe 5 to 10 countries in the west of Africa. So we're going to need a portfolio of work. If we go through the project route, that's not going to cut it. The program route doesn't look like it's going to cut it either. So it looks like we're going to have a whole strategy, because we have to devise a whole strategy. The strategy we use for the UK is not going to cut it for West Africa. So that's when you have selected, prioritized, and controlled projects, programs, work streams, and change activities that are conditioned for that particular strategy. So the strategy we use for the UK when we bring about change is different from the strategy that we're going to use when we bring about change in West Africa. So that's when you begin to look at it from a portfolio perspective. Now, we use the product management approach when we are bringing about innovation, when we're bringing about solutions, when we are talking about something that already exists and we want to add another layer. Product management is probably the best way to go. And what you're trying to do there is you're managing every stage within that product life cycle. And so when you come to our video around approaches, project delivery approaches, and that kind of thing, we will go into more detail around each one of these approaches. But again, as we talk about what is project management, I just wanted to put that in there so you could get a sense of not everything when it comes to delivering change. Project management is not the only way to go. Okay, you've got program management, you've got portfolio management, and you've got product management as well. So what I'm hopefully doing, and I hope this is making sense, is taking you through key concepts, key fundamentals of project management. No matter what we come to learn as new and innovative ways, there are some fundamentals that don't change, and we haven't proven to change, and that's what I'm taking you through right now. We're going to look at another fundamental. It's to do with project constraints. Okay, this is often called the triangle of triple constraints, because it pertains to these 3 aspects of projects. It pertains to scope, it pertains to time, and it pertains to cost. The argument is that if you change one of these factors, the other 2 will be impacted. Now I'm going to add a 4th to the mix, because over the years, a 4th one has come to light. So it's no more a triangle. Even though you're going to go out there and you're going to find it being referred to as the triangle of constraints, bear in mind that really and truly, it is not really a triangle. And perhaps there is academic research, academic argument to say, actually, no, quality doesn't really have a bearing. I think more and more people are beginning to see that it does. So I don't know when they're going to change the concept of the triangle, but just bear in mind that it's not really a triangle anymore. So there's that 4th dimension, which is quality. And again, think about it. If you change your scope, your quality will be impacted. If you change your time, your quality will be impacted. If you change your cost, your quality will be impacted. Let me illustrate. If you had 2 things to deliver and it was going to cost £1,000 and take 1 month to deliver, if your client now decided that they wanted 3 more things, one must not assume that the cost and time that we've already agreed will remain the same. Likewise, if you decrease the budget one should expect that there'll be an impact on your deliverables, and possibly the timeline could be reduced, or it may even go up because of the upset that was caused by the decrease to the budget. So when we refer to the scope in project management, we are talking about what the project needs to deliver. Time refers to the specific timeline we have yet to deliver this project. Remember, we talked about the fundamentals of a project. It has to have a beginning and an end. So changes to one of these areas will impact one or both of the others. So if we increase the scope, we may need more time. We may need more resources, and this will affect the cost. So you can see that how these are all connected. If you've been asked to deliver 4 things, that's your scope. If you are then said you don't need to deliver 4 things anymore, you only need to deliver 2, perhaps your time will remain the same, or perhaps it will change. Perhaps your cost will remain the same, or perhaps it will change. The quality will hopefully go up because now you're only delivering 2 things, or perhaps it might not go up. It might even decrease because there are connections between the things that have happened. There's a possibility that your quality may even go down. So what are we trying to point out here? Don't take things for granted. We do not assume in project management. That is why we have the RAID log. RAID stands for R-A-I-D, and there are also various versions of that. And A in RAID is the assumptions. Always look at your assumptions. Never assume in project management. So essentially what we're saying here is that there are constraints. You do one thing here, you're very likely to impact there, and so check it out. That's the whole point behind the project constraints.